around 16 to 18 degrees Celsius here. Still managing to push towards 20 plus degrees Celsius further south and east, so top temperatures likely around 27, maybe 28 degrees Celsius, but still a touch down on those values that we've seen over the last few days. As we head into tonight, then those showers will continue to push their way through, so chance of some rain around for many areas over the forthcoming night. But it's going to be much less humid and much less muggy for all of us, so really more comfortable for sleeping right across the board. Those minimum temperatures generally around 10 to 15 degrees Celsius. Into the new working week, the showers will tend to be most frequent across the northern half of the UK, so particularly Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England, potential for further showers around at times. The southern half should see some decent sunny spells developing in there and should stay largely dry, but still with a brisk breeze around for the vast majority of us. Temperatures now around 18 to 23 degrees Celsius. And we'll keep a fairly similar picture as we head throughout the rest of this week. Changeable with further showers and sunny spells at times, perhaps some longer spells of rain. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Five hosts, 5 opinions, 5 fearless debates,
5 unfiltered takes on the day's news.
5 reasons not to be anywhere else on Saturday night.
This is the Saturday 5.
You got me good there. Britain's biggest Saturday night TV show.
It's not a bad brand.
Yeah. Uncensored.
Very, very racy tonight.
On the unpredictable.
What did she say? Can you translate it for us?
And always entertaining.
And how can a country go from being led by William Wallace
Saturday nights from 6 p.m. only on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You're going to want to stay tuned, trust me.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
I think that things have gone a little bit too far in this country. The fact of the matter is that any well-trained journalist does know that free speech does have to exist in a certain environment where you can't be defamatory and you can't incite racial hatred or violence. We know that because we're trained to recognise it. But what's happened here in this country is we've chucked the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah.
What's happened now is that everyone is starting to react to fairly, not innocent phrases exactly, but we're starting to become really obsessive about things that don't actually matter and people should be allowed to speak about. Lucy Connolly's she's a case in point. If you think that the actual Prime Minister now is leading the charge, along with Shabnam Mahmood, to actually shorten jail sentences or have no jail sentences for some criminals, and yet Lucy Connolly is in prison for 31 months and loses her appeal, you've got to start asking yourself, what is going on here?
And also, can I just add, Paul Richards, Keir Starmer asked about Lucy Connolly. He says, oh, sorry, I'm not across the case. Come on, pull the other leg. By the way, I don't want to just talk about Lucy Connolly. This is free speech in Britain. Free speech, in my book, does not exist in Britain.
Well, technically, you're right, of course, because we can't just say whatever we like. We can't walk into a crowded theatre and shout fire, right? And I can't say so-and-so's a paedophile or so-and-so's a terrorist without, you know, there being some evidence for that. We can't just say whatever we like anywhere we like. We have boundaries and rules. And I would say to the Americans coming over and lecturing us on how to run the place, you know, they display total ignorance of our system so often. If you vox pop American citizens, they don't know where England is. They think our Prime Minister is King Charles.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good morning and welcome to the Camilla Tominey Show, only on GB News. Huge breaking news overnight as America strikes Iranian nuclear sites. We'll be reacting to that historic US intervention throughout today's programme. Secretary of State for Business and Trade, Jonathan Reynolds, will join me. I'll be asking him about the UK's response to those American strikes overnight. Where does Britain stand now? And following Baroness Casey's review into rape gangs, will the new national inquiry really hold all of the officials involved to account? Dame Priti Patel, the Shadow Foreign Secretary, will be here in the studio for more reaction to those strikes. And in domestic politics, how are the Conservatives going to avoid electoral wipeout after the Tories recorded their lowest ever share in an Ipsos poll this week? Former head of the British Army, Lord Dannatt, will also provide his analysis on that news this morning. What could the UK do next? And following Baroness Louise Casey's review into the rape gang scandal, Fiaz Mergel, the founder of Tell Mama and Faith Matters, has called on Muslim leaders to speak out. He'll join me to share more. And as Palestine action is set to be banned this week, Lord Walmley, the former advisor to the government on political violence and disruption, will give me his reaction. As you can imagine, it's a big show this morning to come, so do not even think of going anywhere. Well, before we get stuck into the Sunday front pages, let's cross live now to our Home and Security Editor, Mark White, for the latest update. Mark.
Good morning to you, Camilla. Yes, we've had another wave of strikes targeting Iran this morning by the Israeli Air Force. They have gone after Iranian combat jets on the ground at an airbase in Iran, and also after those missile launchers that we know have fired so many of the ballistic missiles towards Israel. And in direct response to what happened overnight with this US and Israeli strike that took place, we have had two waves of ballistic missiles that have been launched towards Israel this morning, and some really worrying images that have come out showing direct impacts on civilian areas around Tel Aviv and around Haifa. And they show, Camilla, some really significant damage in these civilian areas. There are so far 16 people who have confirmed to have been injured in those strikes, but rescue services are currently searching through some of the worst damaged areas, and there are some of the apartment blocks in Tel Aviv that have the whole of the front facade of these apartment blocks is missing, and there's, you know, other across the street, other parts of apartment blocks that appear to have just collapsed completely. So very concerning. Even if people were in those buildings and in their air raid shelters, then they may well be trapped under the rubble there. So some real concern about what lies ahead. All eyes, of course, Camilla, are on Iran. Iran's foreign ministry has just said that the US will reap some very dangerous consequences. They've described the US government as warmongers, but as yet, as far as we understand, there has been no retaliatory action by the Iranians on either Israeli US, I should say, military bases or any US missions, diplomatic missions and embassies across the Middle East.
Worrying times, Mark White. I'm sure we'll have updates from you throughout the day. Thank you very much indeed. Well, joining me now to review the Sunday front pages is political correspondent at The Independent, Millie Cook, formerly of this parish, I must point out. Millie, I mean, obviously the newspapers didn't get this US strike. It happened 1 a.m. our time. Interestingly, there is a story on the front of the Sunday Telegraph talking about an alleged Iranian spy plot. So, of course, the theme of what has happened has been in the papers, but not the actual news that Donald Trump and J.D. Vance announced overnight. What's your reaction?
I mean, it was a big night. Obviously, no one really expected Trump to do that overnight. He said he was going to sort of give it 2 weeks. He was really leaving the door open for sort of a diplomatic solution. But we did see bombers moving yesterday, those B-2 bombers. People thought they were heading towards Guam, where they might be stationed for a bit. It sort of looked a little bit like posturing maybe from Trump. Turns out they were heading straight to deliver strikes on 3 nuclear sites in Iran. So I think a lot of people woke up this morning to the news and there was surprise there, but also obviously the front pages were sort of looking at it yesterday. Everyone had their eyes on Iran throughout the day. So there's surprise, but also it has been building quite rapidly over the last week.
I mean, the military hardware involved here, 6 bunker buster bombs, particularly to be used on Fordo, the only bombs that could get through that mountainous region where the nuclear facility is held, 30 Tomahawk missiles. What I found quite interesting, Millie, is the Prime Minister's statement so far, quite circumspect, really, talking about the fact that Iran's nuclear program is a grave threat to international security, but not fully throatedly supporting what Donald Trump has done overnight, which is interesting, not least when we heard Reform leader Nigel Farage really pledge his support to the US president today.
I mean, over the last week, we've seen Starmer really talking about de-escalation. It seems like he's been sort of whispering in Trump's ear, maybe let's not do strikes yet. He's really pushing for sort of calm and considered response. However, obviously, Trump has gone ahead and struck Iran, and the UK is closely allied with the US. We need to be very cautious in our language. It's notable that those strikes were sort of US alone. The UK's permission was not sought before, but they were informed. There is a chance, though, if they want to launch strikes from Diego Garcia, that the UK would need to give permission. So I think Starmer at the moment is treading quite carefully to make sure that he's sort of aligned with Trump, he's not departing from his position, but also the Prime Minister doesn't want to be drawn into a war.
No.
So he's sort of being very cautious with his language.
But it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's in stark contrast to the sort of bromance that we saw unfold over the trade deal, you know, first name terms, oh, Donald, oh, Keir, and all the rest of it.
Sure.
And then we've seen him sort of fence-sitting this week. Is your impression of the Prime Minister somebody who, I suppose, is innately against war of any form? Maybe he was somebody who as a student might have had a CND badge on, I don't know, but, you know, he's got quite a socialist past and therefore maybe he just is averse to this.
I think also there's sort of that fear of such a rapid escalation. I think nobody wants to be drawn into sort of a nuclear conflict. So I think that the Prime Minister, he's a very considered person. He moves quite slowly, often to his fault, but also I think it can also be seen as a strength of the Prime Minister. He's not a sort of knee-jerk responder. And I think that there is a fear, especially when you're dealing with nuclear powers or people who are trying to be nuclear powers, that if you have those sort of knee-jerk responses, it might not end that well for anyone.
The front page of The Observer is interesting because it just features the Iranian supreme leader, the Ayatollah, and what happens with regard to regime change is something that Donald Trump isn't being particularly clear about at this point, Millie, let's put it that way. And we're expecting to hear from the Iranians, I think, a little later on, and if we do get breaking news, of course, we will bring it to you in this show. Let's just move on to domestic matters, because there is an extraordinary poll which is featured in The Telegraph by Ipsos. Now, there was a magic number that was being bandied around Reform, the number that they needed to achieve in order to try and win a majority at the next general election. My impression was that magic number was 31.5% of the vote. What are Ipsos saying Reform is polling at?
34%. So it's a pretty extraordinary poll for Reform. It's their best poll so far. And if we sort of translate it over to seats, then they'd be winning an outright majority. There's definitely a health warning with it. It's not an MRP poll. It's not done on a constituency-by-constituency basis. So it is hard to directly transfer that over to constituencies and to a general election. However, the general shape of it is pretty extraordinary. We've got Reform on 34%, Labour down at 25%, and the Tories down at 15%.
15%?
Which is pretty appalling. When you transfer it over to seats, again, health warning, but the Tories will be getting less than 10 seats. Which is pretty shameful.
Really. I mean, I shall be asking Dame Priti Patel about it a little later, but it doesn't make for great reading, except for Nigel Farage. And what's the headline of The Telegraph there?
Farage on course to be Prime Minister after next election.
Music to his ears, I mean, we've got a long way to go, though, it should be said. I mean, because of the news cycle, everybody's talking about elections every 5 minutes. And actually, this is a marathon, not a sprint. But certainly inside Reform HQ. The other thing that's interesting, this polling would have taken place after the Zia Yusuf incident. So clearly that's not really had that much cut through. Was it a bit of a Westminster bubble story, do you think?
I mean, maybe. And also, even as that aside, Nigel's policies were unveiled before this as well. And there was a lot of criticism about funding and how he was going to pay for it. And I think some Westminster commentators sort of thought that maybe this could put people off Reform.
Actually, that's a really good point. So this poll has taken place after he suggested that he would, like Labour or some Labour backbenchers, want to scrap the two-child benefit cap. And some people said, why are you doing that? But it was parking his tanks on Labour's lawns. But, OK, so the public seems to quite like that policy.
I think it just seems to have sort of gone over everyone's heads in the sense of people actually just want strong policies rather than people being too worried about how much it's going to cost, which is quite telling.
All right, we're talking about red policies. The Workers' Rights Bill, the Mail on Sunday has once again got its knickers in a twist about it. Why?
I think there's a lot of concern. So this is a story about how the Tories have written to business leaders, calling them to kick up a fuss about the bill, saying it will they're sleepwalking into disaster if they let Labour go ahead with it. They're concerned that it's going to sort of cripple businesses. It's going to do more damage to the economy than has already been seen. Labour would argue that they're going to be supporting workers properly, and if you have happy workers, you have productive workers, and that will do sort of better for the economy overall. But the government's own figures say it will cost £5 billion a year. So there are fears about how it's going to hamper businesses, their ability to sort of have a productive business model, because workers, they argue, have too many rights, according to the Tories.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think the Tories have obviously come out and attacked. I'm going to be speaking to Jonathan Reynolds later, and obviously we will be discussing Iran predominantly. But I think it's interesting to see some of these figures. You know, hirings are down, unemployment is up, inflation's up, growth is down, and this is before the Workers' Rights Bill has even been introduced and put through Parliament.
Yeah.
I mean, businesses are going to be very, very worried, and if it puts people off hiring, how can Rachel Reeves then claim that her budget's been a huge, unadulterated success?
Yeah, I mean, especially after the national insurance hike, which already has put a lot of pressure on businesses, and there's already been difficulties with hiring because it costs them more to hire individual workers. So if you have that combined with sort of tighter restrictions on what happens when those workers are in place, it is going to be difficult. But then coming back to that argument about that was sort of one of the main things that Labour promised before the election. They said they were going to look after workers and people voted for it and they won a massive majority.
And there was talk, wasn't there, that Angela Rayner's bill would be watered down, and she railed against it, former trade unionist, so she knows which side her bread is buttered. What do we think it says of the kind of inner mechanics of Downing Street that this is being pushed through? Because we did have talk of a row between Rachel Reeves and Angela Rayner over funding. Treasury once again trying to put the brakes on any big spending. Angela Rayner is sort of emerging as a bit of a dark horse here, because if anyone thought there would be leadership change, they might point to the Chancellor. Let's be honest, she's not had a great budget. She's not had great PR around that. Is Angela Rayner waiting in the wings, do we think, Millie?
There's certainly talk about it. I think especially as Labour's facing criticism for sort of shifting towards the right and their own MPs being concerned about Labour abandoning its own values, Angela Rayner has managed to position herself as sort of a bastion of the left. She's sort of looking after the sort of traditional Labour values. And this employment rights bill, if she gets it through in its current form, will be a massive win for her.
Millie Cook, thank you very much for coming in. I hope you come back. Great to have your debut on the Camilla Tominey Show. Brilliant stuff. Well, coming up next, as I say, I'm going to be speaking to the Secretary of State for Business and Trade, Jonathan Reynolds. This is the Camilla Tominey Show, only on GB News.
I hope we haven't forgotten anything.
Travel insurance, I tick that box.
Yeah, but remember what you forgot last year.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Just like we're seeing across the UK, the heat wave that's also been in place in other areas of Europe is now beginning to subside and ease, with temperatures generally dropping back towards closer to average for the time of year. And bar the odd shower, there will be plenty of sunshine across many areas of the Mediterranean. High pressure is looking like it will be staying in charge for a good portion of this forthcoming week, so there'll be plenty of fine weather around.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our viewers and listeners. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/your say. There, you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/your say, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes and Kerr weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
What is the state of our economy? What is the state of our National Health Service? What is the state of our schools?
What on earth is going on?
Understanding Britain means understanding the state we are in. This is State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin, Wednesdays, Thursdays and Fridays from 8 p.m. on GB News.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Welcome back. The Business Secretary, Jonathan Reynolds, will be with us in just a moment. He's just being mic'd up. Before that, let's cross over now to GB News presenter and former Defence Secretary, Michael Portillo. Michael, normally I speak to you a little later in the show, but let's speak now, because with your former Defence Secretary hat on, very intrigued to know what your reaction is to the airstrikes overnight.
My reaction is that I didn't expect it, that the President of the United States has taken an opportunity that was opened up for him by Israel. I think none of this would have happened without Israel's action over the last 8 or 9 days. The President has clearly decided that here was an opportunity to get rid of the threat of nuclear weapons from Iran. And I feel that if that threat has been dealt with, which I think probably it has been, then the world is a safer place.
Is it a safer place, however, Michael, if Tehran retaliates?
Tehran's ability to retaliate has, of course, been massively reduced by what's been going on with Israel and, indeed, the reduction of the capability of Hamas, Hezbollah and the Houthis. So I don't say that Iran can't retaliate at all, but certainly the threat from Iran has been very substantially reduced. What we can't predict at the moment is whether this is going to go a stage further and lead to regime change. Regime change is one of those things that certainly presents a huge number of uncertainties, and it hasn't always gone well in the past. But the whole reason that this has been happening is that this particular regime in Tehran not only has been on the path towards securing nuclear weapons, but has also created immense instability throughout the region because it finances and encourages terrorist groups like Hamas, Hezbollah and the Houthis.
What did you make of the Prime Minister's statement, Michael, released today? The situation in the Middle East remains volatile and stability in the region is a priority. We call on Iran to return to the negotiating table to reach a diplomatic solution to end this crisis. I mean, it's not the fully throated support of the US that Nigel Farage has given.
Well, it's also rather debatable, isn't it? Is stability the priority? I think getting rid of Iran's nuclear weapons is probably the priority. That is the view that President Trump of the United States has taken. I mean, Britain's policy, I think, has been rather pathetic. The policy until this morning was de-escalation. In other words, they didn't want this to happen. Now, Keir Starmer is saying that Iran should not be allowed to have a nuclear weapon and that the United States has taken steps to degrade that possibility, to get rid of that threat. So I'm afraid the British position has not been a very glorious one. It has been pretty inconsistent, and it is the sounds of an impotent player from the sidelines. We don't have the military force to be able to have any kind of action in this. We can't influence events. Keir Starmer thought that he'd had an assurance from President Trump that President Trump wasn't going to do this. So I'm afraid we look rather weak and inconsequential.
Michael, just take us behind the scenes. What will be happening now? Obviously, you've been there at the sharp end as Defence Secretary. Are we expecting Cobra meetings? What happens in the Ministry of Defence at a time like this?
Well, I very much hope that there will be a review of our security. I mean, this appalling incursion at Brize Norton, RAF Brize Norton the other day, makes me very nervous. I mean, how can it possibly be that 3 years into a war between Russia and Ukraine, and many days into this action between Israel and Iran, that we still haven't strengthened our defences against possible terrorist attack? There's not much that Britain can do in the situation between Iran and Israel, or between the United States and Iran, but I do hope that Britain at least can take steps to defend itself. That seems to me to be a priority. I rather fear that they may all be running around in Whitehall saying, Trump has done the wrong thing, Trump hasn't listened to us, Trump has, put us in danger, rather than thinking about the ways in which this country now needs to be defended.
I mean, what do you make of the idea that we were consulted but not asked to help? In a way, Michael, it speaks to perhaps our diminished defence capabilities, perhaps.
Oh, yes. I mean, all of this is about our diminished defence capabilities. All of Europe is standing on the sidelines. I rather prefer the position that Olaf Scholz has taken, the Chancellor of Germany, who at least said that Iran represented a threat to all of us and had said that Israel was doing our dirty work for us. I prefer what he's been saying, but none of the European countries are players in this matter at all. And in the particular case of destroying these nuclear bunkers, even Israel didn't have the capability of doing it. We're talking here about a very sophisticated, massive weapon, which only the United States deploys. And according to some reports, 6 of these weapons were dropped on a single nuclear facility overnight. These are bombs that weigh 13 tons, of which 2.5 tons is explosive. And the 13 tons dropped from a height of 7.5 miles, enables them to penetrate very deep beneath the ground before they explode. And that is why they have the potential to destroy these facilities. Whether they have destroyed those facilities, I think, must remain an open question, because it would seem to me too early for us possibly to know that.
And what should we make, Michael, as we chat while we wait for Jonathan Reynolds, the business secretary, to be ready to be mic'd up? What do you make of the fact that these B-2 bombers came from Guam rather than Diego Garcia? Is this now making us all reflect a little more carefully on the Chagos deal?
I think you're leading me too far there. I mean, the United States will have chosen the place for takeoff according to what suited the requirement best. I mean, I don't know what considerations will have been in their minds. We're talking here about very long flights in incredibly sophisticated aircraft. I mean, aircraft that to me don't even look like aircraft. They're extraordinary, these B-2 bombers, and dropping these massive munitions. But it's 25 years since I was Defence Secretary, and I cannot tell you where is the best place in the world from which to fly these aircraft.
It can't have been that long, Michael Portillo, honestly. And finally, let's just discuss, you mentioned earlier, regime change. I think Donald Trump appears to have ruled out any suggestion that he is about to, quote, take out the supreme leader of Iran, the Ayatollah. What's your interpretation of events? I mean, is this just about wiping out Iran's nuclear capability or something much, much bigger?
Well, another statement from another official in the United States conceded that you could never say that you've taken out these facilities forever, because, of course, as long as the regime remains, they will try to rebuild. If they've moved the nuclear material elsewhere and therefore haven't lost it, then they have capability of moving it back or creating new facilities or whatever. And if you want to end that situation, you'd have to have another regime, a regime that didn't want to develop nuclear weapons, didn't want to back Hamas, Hezbollah and the Houthis. So another regime would certainly be a big step closer to peace. We've taken maybe a small step closer to peace, but regime change would be a bigger one.
And also there's a problem in Iran in that the resistant movements there aren't joined up. There's lots of different individual pockets of resistance, but there isn't a, for want of a better description, an Alexei Navalny-type figure to present an alternative to the Iranian people, who I'm sure look back at pre-revolution, pre-1979, longing for those days again.
I think many people do long to go back, or at least they long to get rid of this regime, even if they weren't supporters of the Shah. I mean, that was a regime which had its faults as well, by the way. But it is very difficult for us to predict what happens with regime change. But I mean, there's recently been regime change in Syria. What we can say at this stage is that we're much better with that regime change in Syria than we were before, because a Russian client, a very important Russian client, has been removed from the map. Putin no longer has influence in Syria in the way that he did. So although we can't predict the result of regime change, we can say that a regime that wasn't intent on developing a nuclear weapon would be a better regime than the one we have today in Iran.
I'd imagine people watching and listening to this programme will be fearing two things: terror threat to the UK as a result of this, and also more mass migration if things don't work out as planned in Iran. What do you think, Michael?
Yeah, I think both of those are real possibilities. So I certainly hope that on the first, that the government is today spending its time making sure that our defences are much more secure than they've appeared to be recently. And this government, or a government, has to get control of the migration situation, because if it weren't refugees coming from a new situation in the Gulf, it'll be refugees or economic migrants coming from somewhere. I mean, Britain is a desirable place to come to, not least because we have extraordinary social security policies that give people quite a lot of money as soon as they arrive in the country, and housing and health benefits and all sorts of things. So, I mean, people will be attracted to our country from disaster or not from disaster, simply from the temptation of moving somewhere where they'll be richer. So our migration policy has to be dealt with anyway.
And another piece of insider intel, if you could give it to me, Michael, when something like this happens, how much will it be the Defence Secretary John Healey leading the UK's response, or is it actually at prime ministerial level now with consultation between the two? Who leads on this?
Well, I think the Prime Minister should lead, and that would certainly be my position at the time, that the Prime Minister would lead. I mean, of course, the Prime Minister will consult the Defence Secretary, and by the way, the chiefs of the armed services, they need to be consulted as well. But as we've already implied in this conversation, it goes well beyond that. I mean, it goes to things like police forces, because, you know, if we do face a stronger terror threat than before, we've always faced a terror threat, then that involves not just the armed forces, it involves police forces, and by the way, it involves citizens as well.
I wonder also if it might embolden Donald Trump's claim for more defence spending in Europe, Michael. I mean, as you say, we're talking about 30 Tomahawks, 6 bunker buster bombs paid for by the US. I think we can wrap now, actually, Michael. I've got Jonathan Reynolds, the Business Secretary now. Thank you very much indeed for your time this morning.
Thank you.
We look forward to your show at 11, Michael. Jonathan Reynolds, thank you very much indeed for joining me on what I know is an extremely busy and quite momentous morning for you and the government. Why hasn't the Prime Minister been more fully throated in his support of the US President? We've heard from Nigel Farage. He said he supports this strike. I can't see the word support in this statement that was issued at 7:30 this morning.
Good morning, yes, and sorry if the hectic nature of the morning has made me a little bit delayed. We're absolutely clear. We support the prevention of Iran obtaining a nuclear weapon. We had proposed, as other European countries had, a diplomatic means to do that. The Iranians rejected that, and now that's what the Iranians must return to. But we're absolutely clear that Iran having a nuclear weapon would be a threat to international security, and there's simply no way we could countenance that.
Are you supporting this and regime change, Mr. Reynolds? Where do you stand on regime change and the future of the supreme leader of Iran?
Well, I think the people who suffer the most from the Iranian regime are the Iranian people, but that is not the question for this action. This is about the deterrence of Iran obtaining a nuclear weapon, what that would mean not only for regional security, which obviously has an impact on particularly the economic security of the UK because of the importance of trade coming through the Middle Eastern region. People must understand that the Iranian regime is engaged in a level of hostility to this country, whether that is cyber attacks on a weekly basis against critical national infrastructure in the UK, whether it's wholly unacceptable activities on British soil, often, by the way, in relation to Iranian nationals who are dissidents against the Iranian regime. This is not an acceptable global act or a way to behave, and if they possessed a nuclear weapon, the consequences of that would be very significant indeed.
Mr. Reynolds, I don't want to be prone to hyperbole or hysteria, but I think a lot of people this morning in Britain will be very, very worried. They will be asking themselves, is this World War III?
No, I think you're right. I think you're right to say a lot of people will be getting up now, having their breakfast, and they'll be looking at this and thinking, what does this mean? And they'll be worried, there'll be doubt around that. There's two things I would say really to reassure them. The first is that although the United Kingdom's armed forces have not been involved in this activity, we have been preparing for some time for all eventualities. And that includes, in particular, making sure we can get British nationals out of the region, whether they're in Israel, whether they're in the Palestinian territories, whether they're in Iran, although frankly that is unlikely. And we are, first of all, with the teams we have deployed on the Jordanian and Egyptian borders, if people are travelling by land, facilitating the exit of British nationals. And we're also in talks to charter aircraft when we're able to do so to get people out of Israel. The second thing I would say is this point around the fact that Iran is a threat to the UK, is engaged in activities that are unacceptable. And whilst we're not involved in this particular set of military action, it is important to know that this is important to the UK in terms of preventing that regime possessing a nuclear capability, which frankly no one is denying or disputing. The Iranians themselves, there is no reasonable correlation between the enrichment of this level of uranium and any kind of civil or peaceful means for it.
Do you think we might have to reassess the threat level?
That is always kept under considerable review, but at the same time, you will understand why I won't go into undue details on it. But this is an active issue. The Iranian regime's threat to the UK and activity in the UK is an active issue for our security services, something they're dealing with regularly, not something that would come about just from this added level of conflict in the region. It is something we unfortunately have to deal with on a weekly basis.
A couple of domestic matters while I have the benefit of time with you, Mr. Reynolds. The Grooming Gang report by Dame Louise Casey. Have you read it?
I haven't read it all. I'll be absolutely clear on that. I've read, obviously, the summary in the news that's come out of that. What I've seen is it's an incredibly important and thorough piece of work, and Dame Louise Casey should be very much thanked for her service in preparing that.
And in announcing a national inquiry, judge-led statutory inquiry into the grooming gangs, does that mean that Labour has jumped on a far-right bandwagon?
No, it doesn't. I think actually if you look at some of the information in the summary of that, what is really significant is the way Dame Louise Casey talks about her own initial scepticism about a national inquiry, but actually from the evidence she's had, from the lack of adequate responses she's had, she thinks that is the right thing forward. But I've no doubt with her motivations, they're entirely based on keeping people safe, tackling abuse, tackling vulnerability, and I think that's absolutely right. So
just to confirm, holding a national inquiry does not equate to jumping on a far-right bandwagon, because that's what the Prime Minister suggested when the Tories called for one.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't.
No. So he was wrong.
I would say on that, there are people who have got involved in this issue, not because they care, but because they see it as something they can exploit for political benefit. I've seen that in my own area. That is not what the Prime Minister is about. That's not what Dame Louise Casey is about. And I think this is an important piece of work I would hope the whole nation would get behind.
Is Rachel Reeves about to reverse the non-dom crackdown because a millionaire is leaving the UK every 45 minutes, hirings are down, unemployment is up, inflation is up, growth is down, and it's one of those policies in her autumn budget that's completely unravelling, isn't it, Mr. Reynolds?
Well, first of all, let's be clear that we've got the highest growth in the G7. We've seen wages rise more in the first 10 months of this government than they did under the first 10 years of the Conservative government. We've got downgrade growth across the world as a result of a difficult global trading situation, which, by the way, the UK is handling better than any other country in the world. I think you could suggest any country has managed to get the kind of breakthroughs that we have in a difficult situation for interest rate cuts. So there's a lot of positive news. But, wages rising more in 10 months than the first 10 years of the last government, I think that is significant. When it comes to taxation, our view is there should be one tax regime, no matter if you're very rich or very poor. You shouldn't be able to buy yourself a special tax regime. But we always take into account how competitive we are. We have, for instance, the lowest rate of corporation tax in the G7. We'll consider that across the board, and we'll always make the decisions that are necessary to attract talent and money to this country. But we'll do so in a way which applies the same rules to everybody.
Mr. Reynolds, final question. If everything's going so swimmingly and the economy is thriving, as you have just suggested, why on earth do only 19% of Brits think that the Prime Minister's doing a good job? That's a lower approval rating than Gordon Brown when he sold off our gold reserves.
I think this is a difficult time. Not going to argue that we haven't had to make some difficult decisions in the first year of government, but I would say you look at the big decisions, whether that's the big increase in defence spending, the money that's gone into the health service, the stabilisation of the public finances after those disastrous consequences of Liz Truss, the kind of breakthroughs we've had on trade in a really challenging global situation, and what we're about to announce next week with our industrial strategy. Fundamentally, people want to be better off. They are being made better off by this government, but they'll want to feel that before we see that in the polls. I think that's entirely reasonable.
Jonathan Reynolds, thank you very much indeed for your time this morning. Great to speak to you. Well, joining me now in the studio is Shadow Foreign Secretary Dame Priti Patel.
Good morning,
Lovely
Camilla.
to see you. What's your reaction to what's gone on overnight?
Well, first of all, I think America's actions were absolutely necessary. We should be under no illusions whatsoever about the threat of Iran to us all. Yes, to Israel. Iran's stated objective is to obliterate the only Jewish state in the world. It's a country that yells out death to America and has done so for many, many years. And also, as we saw, not just yesterday, but Friday, even 8 weeks ago, we see Iranian proxies operating in our own country. They're a threat to our own national security.
Well, we've seen people marching Iranian flags down the streets of London.
Waving placards supporting the Ayatollah. So I actually do feel very strongly about this, and having been a former Home Secretary and seen too many files on Iran and seen the implications for our country, it is right that the agencies look at everyone that are involved in these, not just protests, but those that are carrying the Iranian placards, you know, the propaganda, basically, defending the actions of Iran, to ensure that they're not on any watch list or a threat to our country. Because, as I've said, we've seen what happened in Brize Norton. We saw what happened in Cyprus at our military base yesterday. And we had people arrested. Iranian proxies were arrested over 8 weeks ago. They now go through criminal proceedings under the Terrorism Act that the last Conservative government brought into place, because we've known for many years, which is why we brought those new legislations in, that Iran is a state threat to this country. The state threats from Iran are so serious and significant.
Why didn't the Tory government prescribe the IRGC?
So, look, I wasn't in the last two Conservative governments. We had a lot of work taking place, and in fact, on
Did you try and do it as Home Secretary?
on Palestinian action, I absolutely, well, two things. One, on IRGC, I absolutely put the files in to have the scrutiny and the processes in place, because, of course, I was the one that prescribed Hamas in its entirety. And then secondly, on Palestinian action, I was the one that started the investigations into them, because, as we know, they were breaking into Israeli defence companies in our own country. They were participating in criminal activity on the streets of our country and on private property and premises. By the way, not only should action be taken against them, which I think the government may be announcing tomorrow, I think they should be subject to compensation orders for the damages that they have done. And by the way, I literally pursued all of that when I was Home Secretary.
Another question for you when you were Home Secretary, and I know you are running out of time because you've got another interview to go to. I want to give you a chance to respond to this. This is the 2020 report into the grooming gangs by the Home Office. You wrote the foreword. It quite preposterously concluded that there was not a disproportionate overrepresentation of British Pakistanis.
So off the back of that report, I set up something called the External Reference Group that looked into the characteristics, the nationalities and the origins of those that were involved in the grooming gangs. We call it grooming gangs now, but it was a range of activity, basically, criminal activity against girls. And actually, I worked with the likes of Sarah Champion and brought in others on that work. And we've got to remember, at the time we had the J review taking place, so we were not in the position to start initiating new reviews. You have to have these ones. The J one was a big one.
No, but do you regret putting your name to that report?
Well, I think actually in hindsight, absolutely, because now we see so much more evidence that has come forward. And it is only through the further evidence, the effectively challenging of the institutional state failure that we've seen. Certainly that applies to the Home Office, there's no doubt about that. That applies to social services around the country. It applies to health services around the country. Definitely applies to local government and local government leaders as well. So the answer to that question is yes. And there should have been so much more that took place in the past, not just to have stopped this, but to fast-track prosecutions. And for the state, parts of the state to stop facilitating, I think, and covering up some of the things that went on.
Well, let's talk about that very briefly, Whitehall, because this week Dominic Cummings and Michael Gove Michael Gove was the former Education Secretary, Cummings was his special advisor, both said that they felt that Whitehall officials pushed back. They pushed back and actually tried to injunct Andrew Norfolk when he wanted to expose everything in the Times in 2011. Was one of the reasons you were pushed out of the Home Office because you wanted to crack down on this?
So I'm very forthright, as people who know me know that I am, and I'm driven by driving outcomes and making sure that no stone is left unturned. And on this in particular, absolutely. I look back and I know that I did a lot of scrutiny, asked all the right questions, probably made a lot of people feel very uncomfortable. I know there are officials in my department that felt very uncomfortable with my line of probing, my line of questioning.
Did they push back and try and cover things up?
I think absolutely. Wow. There's no question about that.
So this inquiry has to look at the politicians, but it also has to look at the civil servants.
So I think this inquiry is...
everyone in Whitehall.
It's everyone. Yeah. It's about institutional state failure. Camilla, this is institutional state failure at every single level. I'm very happy to participate in the inquiry and share what I knew, the questions that I put forward, but also the challenges that I had to put forward in the system and where we weren't getting answers. And by the way, that wasn't just in the Home Office. That was in local councils, the NHS. I remember visiting Sarah Champion's constituency, and I think we were both pretty horrified and gobsmacked by the non-answers we were getting. Yeah. And I will say this, probably the level of indifference we were receiving to our line of questioning.
Well, let's hope that we get further and thorough lines of questioning in this inquiry. I'm sorry you have been a bit squeezed because Jonathan Reynolds was late and I know you have an interview to go to. But thank you very much for your time, Dame Priti Patel. Coming up next, I'm going to be speaking to the former head of the British Army, Lord Danner, to share his thoughts on that developing story in the Middle East as America strikes 3 nuclear sites in Iran. This is the Camilla Tominey Show, only on GB News.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk then?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I ever got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's political podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's political podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it? Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes and Kerr weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. The former head of the British Army, Lord Dannatt, joins me now. Lord Dannatt, great to have your insights this morning as to what has gone on overnight. What's your impression, Lord Dannatt? Have these strikes been successful in completely wiping out Iran's nuclear capabilities? What do we know so far?
Well, of course, we don't know as much as we would like to know. Donald Trump has said quite categorically that he has obliterated Iran's nuclear capability. The Iranians are saying, well, not quite so. The truth will lie somewhere between those two positions. But I think the absolute reality is that the Americans have been planning for quite some time alongside the Israelis to make this strike. Donald Trump said, 2 or 3 days ago, he was going to make his mind up in the next fortnight. That was giving him a little bit of time, I think, time to move his assets into place, move probably other US citizens, diplomats out of harm's way, and then has struck with surprising speed, but I think has struck decisively, and confining the attacks, I think quite reasonably, many people would agree, to those nuclear sites with the massive ordnance projectiles, the MOP bombs that we've been talking about, the penetrator bombs, that he always planned to use and have hit significant number of targets. Now, whether this was the right thing to do or not, I think history will debate for quite some time. But Prime Minister Netanyahu is in no doubt this was the right thing. The way he was eulogizing Donald Trump overnight was easily scripted. But I think there is a fair degree of justification, whatever others might think, that Iran is a rogue regime. It has been threatening Israel. It's been threatening other neighbors. It's had its strength written down through the attacks on Hezbollah and Hamas recent times. The Syrian regime has changed. So I think Netanyahu found this was the moment to strike, and Donald Trump decided that this was the moment to back him up and deal with this problem for once and all.
And what next, Lord Dannatt? Because, of course, talk is turning to regime change. We had that quite extraordinary Truth Social post last week by Donald Trump saying that he wasn't minded to take out the Ayatollah yet. We have had this decapitation strike, Mossad agents inside Tehran taking out those 3 military leaders, replacing one of the leaders who was again taken out. Is this about wiping out Iran's nuclear threat or something much, much more significant in your mind?
Well, you're absolutely right. There are 2 elements to it. One, unquestionably, is reducing, eradicating Iran as a nuclear threat. The other is the issue of regime change. Now, I think the issue of regime change is a completely different matter, and I don't think Donald Trump has gone about this in the right way. When he was calling for the people to rise up, I think that will probably have had the directly opposite effect. I think it will have promoted a rally around the flag feeling amongst many, most, perhaps all, well, not all, but a large majority of Iranians. Yes, the regime is not as strong as it would like to think it was. There has been opposition. The opposition isn't particularly effectively led, but I think being told by an outside world leader to rise up is not the way to do it. It may be that over time, the Iranian people will think, my goodness, this regime that's been leading us has got us into a pretty pickle here. Our nuclear capability, which they told us was the key to our safety and security, has been destroyed. And it may be that over time, in the medium to long term, a regime change might come about in Iran. But I don't see it Donald Trump inspired in the very short term.
What's your analysis of the Prime Minister's rhetoric here, not just today in this statement that he issued at 7:30 this morning, but also this week? It was only on Thursday that the PM was warning Trump not to, quote, ramp up attacks. He also posted on X this notion that Donald Trump wasn't going to do this. And now, of course, he has, Lord Dannatt. I've just spoken to Michael Portillo, the former Defence Secretary, who thinks the Prime Minister's being, well, a little lacklustre in his support of the US.
Well, I think he's put himself between a rock and a hard place. On the one hand, he is very keen to have good relations with Donald Trump. We've seen a lot of effort being put into trade deals and putting the UK into an apparently more favourable position than some of our former EU partners. On the other hand, he clearly doesn't believe that the use of force that the Americans have just demonstrated is the right thing to do. So along with other European leaders, has been calling for restraint and calling for a return to negotiations. Well, I'm afraid the world has moved on rather rapidly. I don't think negotiations in any meaningful form are very likely because the effect of these massive ordnance penetrators has effectively taken the major bargaining chip that Iran had off the table. And I think Iran, if it comes to any form of negotiation, is negotiating for scraps. So the Prime Minister, in a sense, between a rock and a hard place, may have somewhat backed the wrong horse on this one.
Yeah, it doesn't look as if negotiation or indeed diplomacy is top of the agenda for those in Tehran right now. In general, what's your analysis of Trump's handling of this? You mentioned earlier, Lord Dannett, the timing. On one hand, he suggests it could be in 2 weeks' time. Then he goes last night. Element of surprise there?
Well, I think tactically there is an element of surprise there, but I think your question is a broader question, going right back to all that Trump was saying during the presidential election campaign. He wanted to be the president that stopped wars and not started one. No, he didn't start this one, but he certainly weighed into it big time. So he is going very strongly against a major plank of the platform on which he stood, from which he spoke. And I think many people in the United States will say, come on, I didn't vote for this. I voted for the president who was going to stop wars. I voted for the president that was going to fix the Rust Belt. I fixed the president who's going to make America great again. My goodness, now we're spending squillions of dollars overseas joining somebody else's war. So he, on the one hand, you can argue doing the right thing internationally by finishing off and eradicating probably Iran's nuclear capability, has knocked a big dent in his own popularity at home. It'll be interesting to see how he can square that circle. In a sense, he's put himself between a rock and a hard place domestically.
Yeah, I don't think the MAGAs have an appetite to fight another foreign war. What happens now? What will your successor in charge of the military be doing now, Lord Dannett? What conversations will be taking place with regard to the UK's role in this, if it has any?
Well, of course, that's a matter for the Prime Minister and the British government to decide whether we want to take an active role. My own instinct is that we will decide not to do that. So the military focus for now for the UK is to make sure that our force protection measures for those of our citizens and our service personnel in the wider region are as good as they can be. In particular, we've got the sovereign bases in Cyprus, RAF Akrotiri, now had extra aircraft flown there. And I believe the capability is such that we can fly patrols constantly to make sure that that base does not itself come under attack. And then, of course, not so very far away, but heading towards the Indo-Pacific, is the British-led Carrier Strike Group. That is some kind of target as well. So we need to make sure those force protection measures are good. And then, of course, there is the question of a large number of British citizens in the wider region, not the least of which is a very large number who have got rather marooned in Israel. So the government will have to be thinking about non-combat evacuation operations, which themselves are important, but they're difficult and they consume a lot of resources. So I don't think we'll join in an offensive way, but we've got a lot of work to do to make sure British interests, British people are secure in that region.
Well, we may not intervene if the Prime Minister listens to his bestie, Lord Hermer, who believes that if we do play a role against Iran, it could violate international law. What's your response to that, Lord Dannett?
Well, of course, this is the great debating point as to whether what the Israelis have done. Now, they would argue that they're acting in self-defense, but the Americans joining in. Now, you can't make a very strong case that the Americans are defending themselves. But so there is this debate as to whether they have got very close to the line between what is legal internationally and whether they've crossed that line. I think they will argue that Iran posed a wider threat, not just in the Middle East, but in a much wider area as well. And therefore there was an element of preemption for in the interest of wider security and the interests of other nations, that the United States had joined with Israel, not just to protect Israel, but to protect other countries and other people in that wider region. That's what they will argue. But it's going to be an argument that goes on for quite some time. And lawyers like Lord Hermer will, yes, they'll express their point of view for quite some time to come.
Yeah, it might be more difficult for him to argue that point of view if, for instance, Tehran does retaliate at UK military bases.
Indeed. Then, of course, there's the argument as to who sort of shot first, as it were. But if there was to be an attack on a UK base, well, then that does change the paradigm as far as the UK is concerned. But in answer to your earlier question, I think the UK focus will be on force protection and the protection of our people and our interests, rather than proactively joining in this offensive operation.
Lord Dunnett, thank you very much indeed, as ever, for your wisdom and experience this morning. Great to speak to you. We've got a few breaking news lines now. We've heard from Iran's Revolutionary Guard in the last few minutes. They have said that they won't be intimidated by noise made by Donald Trump, describing the White House and Tel Aviv as criminal gangs. They have also said that these responses will bring regret. Tehran has warned the Western world that any move to target the supreme leader, the Ayatollah, would result in shutting the door to any negotiations, saying it would prompt an unlimited response. Well, coming up next, we're going to discuss domestic matters and return to the grooming gang inquiry. I'm going to be speaking to the founder of Tell Mama and Faith Matters, Fiaz Mergel, who will be sharing what he wants Muslim leaders to do in response to this scandal. This is the Camilla Tominey Show, only on GB News.
Hello there, a very good morning to you. This is your GB News weather update provided by the Met Office. For those that haven't been a fan of the heat wave, I do have some good news for you, because low pressure out to the Atlantic is shifting a change to westerly winds, and we're starting to see fresher conditions arriving over the next few days. Still holding on to a touch of that heat first thing across the southeast, so it has been quite a muggy, humid start here, but it is also the southeast where we'll see a quite bright start with some sunshine. Cloud building though, because we have showers pushing their way in from the west, and those will start to turn quite heavy in places, particularly across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Generally quite a blustery day for all of us in amongst all of those showers, but we will still manage to see some sunny spells poking their way through at times. You'll certainly notice that fresher feel though across northern and western regions. Temperatures now closer towards average where they should be for the time of year, around 16 to 18 degrees Celsius here. Still managing to push towards 20 plus degrees Celsius further south and east, so top temperatures likely around 27, maybe 28 degrees Celsius, but still a touch down on those values that we've seen over the last few days. As we head into tonight then, those showers will continue to push their way through, so chance of some rain around for many areas over the forthcoming night. But it's going to be much less humid and much less muggy for all of us, so really more comfortable for sleeping right across the board. Those minimum temperatures generally around 10 to 15 degrees Celsius. Into the new working week, the showers will tend to be most frequent across the northern half of the UK, so particularly Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England, potential for further showers around at times. The southern half should see some decent sunny spells developing in there and should stay largely dry, but still with a brisk breeze around for the vast majority of us. Temperatures now around 18 to 23 degrees Celsius. And we'll keep a fairly similar picture as we head throughout the rest of this week. Changeable with further showers and sunny spells at times, perhaps some longer spells of rain. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
What is the state of our economy? What is the state of our National Health Service? What is the state of our schools?
What on earth is going on?
Understanding Britain means understanding the state we are in. This is State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin, Wednesdays, Thursdays and Fridays from 8 p.m. on GB News.
Welcome back. I am going to be speaking to Fiaz Mergel in just a moment. He's a Muslim who campaigned for the grooming gang inquiry. But first, let's cross briefly and listen to the Iranian foreign minister who is speaking right now in Istanbul.
It has come too far as a species to allow a lawless bully to take us back to the law of the jungle. The Islamic Republic of Iran calls on the Security Council to convene an emergency session to unequivocally condemn the criminal act of aggression by the United States against Iran and to hold the administration in Washington accountable for its violations of fundamental principles of United Nations Charter and of norms of international law. The responsibility of the IAEA and its Director General, who through evident bias in favor of warmongering parties paved the way for the current violence and bloodshed, is now clearer than ever. We call on the IAEA Board of Governors to immediately convene and carry out its legal responsibility in response to the dangerous US attack on Iran's peaceful nuclear facilities, all of which have been under the agency's full safeguards and monitoring. The world must not forget that it was the United States which, in the midst of a process to forge a diplomatic outcome, betrayed diplomacy by supporting the genocidal Israeli regime's launch of an illegal war of aggression on the Iranian nation. Not content with such malign actions, the United States itself has now also opted for a dangerous military operation and aggression against the people of Iran. In doing so, the US administration holds sole and full responsibility for the consequences of its actions, including the Islamic Republic of Iran's right to self-defense under the principles of the United Charter. In accordance with the UN Charter and its provisions allowing a legitimate response in self-defense, Iran reserves all options to defend its security, interests, and people. Thank you very much.
We will now be taking
So we've just heard there from the Iranian foreign minister, just to summarise what he is saying. He's saying that the US has been responsible for a, quote, criminal act, said that they have violated the fundamental principles of international law. And he has warned that Iran has a right to self-defence under the UN Charter and that it will be exploring all options in response to these airstrikes, described the US's overnight activities as waging an illegal war of aggression. We'll bring you more as soon as we have it, but first let's talk to Fiaz Mergel, who's the founder of Tell Mama and Faith Matters. Lovely to see you this morning, Mr. Mergel. We're bringing it back to domestic matters and discussing the grooming gangs inquiry. Now, you are a Muslim man who pushed for this inquiry. That must have been quite difficult for you.
Well, it is difficult because, unfortunately, individuals of my ethnic background and individuals of my faith background have been involved in this process. So it is difficult, but the reality is we have to be honest and we have to be transparent, and we also have to be authentic in saying what it is. And the reality is there are people here, as Baroness Casey has specifically mentioned in the report, that that culture and the background of individuals seems to be playing a role in the evidence and where it indicates that groups of people are involved in these activities. So we have to be honest and transparent and call it out to be able to stop these heinous acts happening and to bring justice to victims.
Mr. Mergel, was there much in Dame Louise Casey's report that surprised you? I mean, many people said upon its publication that we knew a lot of what she had uncovered, but unfortunately many different people in many different authorities had turned a blind eye, particularly to the largely Pakistani nature of the perpetrators.
Well, first of all, as you said, in answer to your question, did it surprise me? No. The evidence has been pointing for a number of years to individuals of Pakistani heritage who are more involved or inclined, as the evidence is showing, to be involved in group-related grooming activity. And so I was not surprised. The reality here is I think many of us could see the evidence because of the number of cases and prosecutions coming through. And the fact that victims were saying that actually they were being groomed by a group of individuals, mainly of Pakistani heritage, and these voices were here for over a decade. So I'm not surprised. I'm deeply saddened because how can anyone actively know that somebody is a child and then decide that they want to violate them? That is deeply, deeply concerning, and that brings up questions around the morality, the sense of morality of these individuals. And it's not just a handful. The sense of morality which seems to be missing and quite widespread in these groups of individuals, both convicted and those that may be going through the courts now.
I appreciate that generalisations are probably best avoided, Mr. Mergel, but why is it mainly contained in the Pakistani community? Where are some of these abusers coming from? And how have they been able to establish in some cases, and I know Charlie Peters, my GB News colleague, has done a lot of work on this, a sort of geographical abuse network?
Well, you're absolutely right. We need to keep away from any kind of stereotyping and go with the evidence, as you've said, Camilla. And the evidence is showing that in areas like Bradford, in areas like Rotherham, in areas like Rochdale and other places, these issues have been recorded and there are convictions. Why is this happening? Well, I can give you only my anecdotal thoughts on this, and also having grown up and listened to some deeply toxic conversations that I've come across through acquaintances or friends. I think there was a sense that these young girls were seen as, quote, worthless. Start off with that. Now, that brings up a question of what kind of morality does somebody have to see a young girl as worthless? Right? The second thing here is that there is a form of racism. And that form of racism is to see white girls as being lesser than their own daughters. Let's call it out. This is the reality of what's happening, in my opinion. The third thing is opportunism, and the opportunism to basically meet their most carnal, disgusting needs. And in doing so, because these young girls were very vulnerable and effectively on the streets, and the opportunity arose. And I think fourth and last but not least, a sense of deep disengagement from wider non-Muslim white society. In other words, integration was non-existent.
Yeah.
Because if you actually feel and empathize for others who don't look like you, who are different culturally, who may be different religiously, if you can empathize and care for them as people that you want the best of, as you want for yourself, you wouldn't dare do what these individuals did.
I was intrigued with you. I was intrigued with you mentioning. Sorry, Mr. Mergel, I was just intrigued by you mentioning Bradford there, because I was at a press conference with Kemi Badenoch and Chris Philp, the Shadow Home Secretary, earlier in the week, and survivors. They both made the point that Bradford particularly has been resisting any investigation whatsoever into this. Why do you think that is?
Because they're probably, anyone who's resisting any investigation has got something to hide.
Yeah.
Okay, anyone who resists an investigation into the violation of young children on such a scale has got something to hide, because our basic moral reaction should be, my God, we should look at this. And so they've got something to potentially hide, okay? Whatever it is, who knows? Second of all, I suspect there are individuals in the political echelons that know they're probably going to end up having to answer some difficult questions. And third thing, are we going back to this whole issue about, oh my God, is this going to cause racial differences and divisions in our society? Well, we're way past that point. As Baroness Casey had said, if we had dealt with these issues when they had happened 5, 10 years ago, we wouldn't be having these ramifications today. You have to deal with the difficult issues if you are to stop major social ramifications down the line. What Baroness Casey was saying, you need to have courage to tackle the difficult, to get on with, to move your society on. And we're now in this position because all of these individuals who hit this matter saying, well, it could be racist, we don't want to talk about this. We are now dealing with major issues that are having ramifications up and down our country.
Mr. Mergel, final question. Should faith leaders, Muslim community leaders, other prominent Muslims be putting their head above the parapet a little more and speaking as you have on my show today?
It's essential. Look, I mean, can't they see their daughters in these young girls? Let's just put it as that. Can't they see their daughters in these young girls? It doesn't matter whose daughter that is. Can't they see their children in these young girls? And that's the basic question. And if we can't see our basic humanity in others, our sense of empathy with others, then we need to question ourselves.
Yeah. Fiaz Mergel, thank you very much indeed for your candour this morning. Great to speak to you. Coming up next, I'm going to be speaking to the life peer and former government advisor on political violence and disruption, Lord Warney. He'll be here to give us his take on Palestine action being banned this week. He called for it months ago, and now it's happened because of the attack on the RAF base at Brize Norton. Stay tuned for that. This is the Camilla Tominey Show, only on GB News.
I forecast a perfect holiday in the sun.
Weather looking good then?
For sure, and no worries about our travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
Just like we're seeing across the UK, the heat wave that's also been in place in other areas of Europe is now beginning to subside and ease, with temperatures generally dropping back towards closer to average for the time of year. And bar the odd shower, there will be plenty of sunshine across many areas of the Mediterranean. High pressure is looking like it will be staying in charge for a good portion of this forthcoming week, so there'll be plenty of fine weather around.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
No matter the state it's in, this is our nation. Join me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for a genuine, honest discussion on where we have been, where we are going, and where we are with the people who set the direction. That's State of the Nation every Monday and Tuesday at 8 o'clock, only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
A lot of people have been imbibed with the notion you're born white, you're born male, you've won life's lottery, but that's not what people are telling you. Tell us, what began your journey on this fascinating path?
I mean, I think rather like you, I've had a long interest in men and mental health. And I was talking to companies about men's mental health, and at the end, there'd always be guys who come up to me and say, I can't say this out loud, but my career has taken a real hit because I'm a man. I don't know what to do with that. You know, things had to change. I'm not sexist, I'm not racist, but I'm really suffering. So I heard that so many times. I thought I need to investigate this, gauge how wide this is, and did some polling, spoke to a lot of people, and I was really staggered by what we got back. You know, for nearly half of all white guys to be walking around too scared to even give respectful feedback to a colleague, to not risk making a joke, to, you know, a third have said that their mental health has been affected because there's that terrible fear that doing or saying the wrong thing and you're out the door.
Gets you cancelled.
Yeah, and then, you know, particularly from young guys, you know, more than 1 in 3 young guys saying that they've directly lost out on career opportunities, promotions because they're white men. It was a scale I didn't expect, and you know, as I said, no one's saying this didn't have to change. You know, in my old BBC days, I've worked undercover to expose racism, but the DEI, the diversity programs that have been rolled out, aren't just nice HR policies. They're actually rooted in an early 70s radical Marxism that divides everyone into oppressed and oppressor. And if you're white and male, you're an oppressor. Doesn't matter if you're working class, doesn't matter what your mental health's like. You're already seen as top of the pack. And as we know, it's a massive distortion of what it's like for most guys.
GB News, the People's Channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our viewers and listeners. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/your say. There, you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/your say, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
This is our country, and we think it's amazing. From high tea to the high street, we love it all. Even the rain, we like that too. There's nowhere else we'd rather be. That's why we're here to be the fearless champion of Britain, its voices and its values. Because we are GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. The Life peer and former government advisor on political violence and disruption, Lord Warney, joins me now. Lord Warney, great to have you here on the show this morning, not least after what has unfolded overnight in Iran. Talk about political violence and the threat of it. Are we worried that this may spill over into the UK's streets?
Yeah, Iran's terrorist expansionism has done that, precisely that, for a number of years now, and there is a risk in the short term, at least, that you could see a further ramping up of the kind of malign activities that Iranian agents such as the IRGC have been conducting in this country. We've got to be vigilant for that, but it's really important to keep in mind that the prospect of Iran developing a nuclear weapon will not only create that enormous nuclear risk in of itself, which could be catastrophic. It would also embolden the regime to be able to think it can carry out more of the kind of terrorism and influence operations on British streets with impunity. So it is vital that the West works together to stop Iran's clear nuclear ambitions.
Yeah, and we've just heard from the Iranian foreign minister talking there about it being an illegal war of aggression and saying that they will be looking at all options when it comes to Iran defending itself and its security. We'll get on to Palestine action in just a moment, but just before then, why haven't we prescribed the IRGC?
Well, very good question, Camilla. And what you've seen over a number of years now is that political leaders in opposition say they're going to do it, and then as soon as they get into office, they change their mind. The Labour government is only the latest to do that. Before that, you had a succession of, I mean, this sort of goes to show the political instability we've had in this country. You've had a succession of conservative politicians who then become prime minister, who say they're going to do it before and then don't do it. Now, this is the moment to prescribe the IRGC. My sense is that the refusal to do so far has been built on a decades-long fallacy that actually you can do business with the Iranian, that you can treat them rationally, whereas in fact they are explicitly an Islamist, terrorist, expansionist regime who are dedicated to fighting the West, to destroying Israel, and ultimately then coming for us. I don't think they've ever really been, well, in those circumstances, we've had to treat them with extreme caution, and they prove time and time again that they are not worth their word on their nuclear ambitions. So this is the moment to recognise that actually the Khomeini regime is implacably a foe of the West, not a partner.
Let's move on to talking about Palestine action now. They're on the public conscience because they broke into RAF Brize Norton and very badly damaged some planes there. Apparently 25 to 55 million pounds worth of damage. This must be frustrating for you. When you were advising the government back in 2024, you specifically said Palestine action should be prescribed. I mean, it's being prescribed tomorrow, but it's a little too late, isn't it, Lord Warney?
Yeah, what you've seen for a number of years now is Palestine Action waging this campaign of largely industrial sabotage, which has been with consequence itself. It's not simply been spraying about bits of paint here and there. There have been many hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of pounds of damage done to defence supplies. You've had employees at defence factories deeply fearful when they've seen these activists break in. They've gone to what they consider to be related organisations like insurance companies, public affairs firms, and there are a number of very serious criminal trials going on at the moment, which involve really serious violence against people. So it's not all been this has not all been about damaging property. And so yes, it's great that the government is pushing on with this now, but I would like to have them to gone further. I do think there is an issue with Palestine Action, with other organisations, that you at the moment you are seeing extreme criminal protest groups who are routinely breaking the law. They're brazenly doing it. They're often live tweeting or advertising on social media what they're doing, but they can do so. They can operate freely. They can organise. They can raise money. They can broadcast what they're doing, and there's a gap here where I understand that it can be a difficult judgment to make as to when an organisation such as Palestine Action triggers the terrorist threshold for full prescription. But we ought to be able to ban them from these criminal activities long before that, which is what I'm urging, what I urged in my review to the government, which is still being considered. And there's going to be an opportunity. They've got an opportunity now with the crime and policing bill going through Parliament, to add this in to prevent a repeat of an organisation where basically you're letting them get away with stuff for years before you finally crack down.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it, where the line is drawn between legitimate protest and political violence. You're pointing out there, Lord Warney, that it's the delineation is where you start committing crimes, where you start trespassing and destroying property. But that question over terror, I mean, this was investigated. I believe the police said at the time that it was a terror investigation. But where do you draw that line?
Well, the definition of terrorism in the 2000 Act, which is accepted and long established, is that terrorism can involve it certainly can involve violence against individuals or organisations, and it can involve vandalism, which causes serious damage, and the definition is whether that is one of sufficient gravity, but also is designed to make a political point. And the Palestine Action have clearly been doing that for a long time now. Some of their actions prior to this have been treated as terrorism offences by the counter-terror police. But I think we need to be clearer as a country, and in the way that we talk about this as politicians, that it's not okay just because you believe in something strongly to smash things up, to try to disrupt it, or to get a headline and get political attention for doing so. We are lucky to live in a democracy. We need to do better at recognizing that and saying to people, look, you might not agree. You've got absolutely every right to protest. Okay. That is part of what our foundation is, but you need to do it peaceably and within the law.
Amen to that. Lord Warney, we have to leave it there because we've got some more breaking news lines coming out of that press conference this morning. Iran's foreign minister calling on the international community to condemn the attack, adding Iran has done nothing wrong. It is difficult to understand why we were attacked on a false claim, he said. He said that the extent of damages are being investigated, saying that the US showed that they have no respect for international law. The foreign minister said that Iran will respond based on our rights. He's also said that Iran has a strategic partnership with Russia, with the foreign minister saying he will have serious consultations with President Putin on Monday. Well, that's quite the axis of evil for you. That's me done for another day. Very busy news day. We will, of course, be updating you all day with what has happened overnight with the strikes on Iran and Donald Trump, and indeed probably the Prime Minister making further statements. Thank you all to all of my guests for joining me today. Of course, I'll be back same time next week, 9:30. But up next, it's Michael Portillo after your latest weather.
heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, this is your GB News weather update provided by the Met Office. We may now officially be into astronomical summer, but it is turning fresher for many of us as we see some heavy showers push in on a brisk breeze, all associated with this area of low pressure. Tightly spaced isobars means those winds are going to be quite blustery around today, and those weather fronts are starting to push in those showers from the west. They have the potential to be quite heavy at times with some rumbles of thunder, particularly across northern and western areas of the UK. And if you are in that breeze, you'll certainly notice the fresher, almost cooler feel to things compared to the recent heat wave. Across northern areas of Scotland, we'll be around the mid-teens in terms of our Celsius mark, more around 20 degrees across the far east where we see a touch of shelter. Again, for parts of Northern Ireland and Northern England, around the high teens here as those showers continue to push their way through. There will be some sunshine in between, but despite the best of the sunshine across the southeast first thing this morning, the cloud will be building as we head into the afternoon, but still highs of 27, 28 degrees Celsius here where we hold on to some of that heat. The showers continuing to spread their way through during this evening and into the forthcoming night, so there is the chance that most places see a touch of rainfall during that 12-hour period or so. The brisk breeze, though, continues pushing those fresher conditions across all areas of the UK, so tonight will be less muggy and more comfortable for sleeping right across the board. Tomorrow is another day of sunshine and showers. Those showers generally always more frequent up towards the north and the west, perhaps some longer spells of rain for the Northern Isles with close to gale strength gusts for a time. Generally, if you're to the east of higher grounds and more broadly across the south, you've got the greater chance of seeing some more prolonged sunshine in there. Still breezy though, but temperatures around 18 to 24 degrees Celsius. Into the rest of next week, it is looking fairly changeable. There will be further showers, potential for thunderstorms at times, but temperatures generally around average for the time of year.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed Heat Pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We're kick-starting summer with your chance to win our biggest cash prize to date, as there's an incredible £54,321 in tax-free cash to be won. What would you spend it on? A brand new car, the holiday of a lifetime, or just sit back, relax and remove some of those day-to-day financial stresses? For another chance to win, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB14 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 1st of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m.